Good afternoon. Many centuries back on a Friday morning, Buddha was sitting under a tree and a man walked in and asked, "Is there a God?" Buddha said, "There is no God." At 9:10, another man walked in and he asked, "Is there a God?" He said, "There is God." A third man walked in and asked, "Is there a God?" At 9:20. Buddha said, "Does it matter? Sit and meditate." And as you would know, Ananda is his cousin and one of his greatest devotees. At 9:30, he mustered courage and asked, I'm saying it in the business parlance, "Are you crazy?" Right? 3 questions, same questions, 3 different answers, as inconsistent as one can be, which is antithesis of management. What the hell is going on here? Buddha said, the first guy is an atheist, so I have to tell him there is God. Otherwise, he'll quote me and argue his case. Second guy is a rabid theist, so I have to tell him there is no God. The third guy is a sincere seeker, so I have to tell him sit and meditate. So he said, you don't answer the question, you always answer the questioner. And thereby, the best teacher in mathematics is not the one who teaches maths the best, but teaches the students the best. And this hyper-personalization is very, very common in the ancient India. But do it at scale in digital age is certainly a challenge. So we have 2 experts here, Sachin and Ravi. We'll hear from them. The first question is there a trivia that you know about hyper-personalization? Not like Buddha ancient times, but sometime in the past or in the present. Maybe you tee up that, and then I'll get to the technology part of it.
Sure. Thank you, Mohan. First of all, really grateful to Zinnov team, and glad to be doing this with this wonderful audience this afternoon. And Mohan, with you after a long time, which feels like a long time ago. I used to live in Australia, in Melbourne, for a couple of years, and I remember going to this wonderful, Italian restaurant with a French colleague and an American colleague of mine. And, they greeted us nicely and gave us a nice little corner table. And about 7 or 8 minutes after we had settled down, the waiter came and took our order. And after he left, the American colleague was pissed off at how slow the service was. By the way, he was from New York City, and so here to go, and he was used to a fast-paced life. While the French colleague was a little peeved off with, he felt being rushed because lunch was all about, which wine goes with which cheese, and it's supposed to be a social event. And I really felt bad for the restaurant because they couldn't get it right. It was hard for anybody in that situation to get it right for essentially a customer group that has very different, not tacit but implicit customer preferences. How do you please, such a group of 3 people? And the second quick example I think of is a friend of mine, an Indian friend of mine, who came back early 50s, had met all his financial goals, moved back to India for family reasons, and I was trying to help him find an apartment in Pune, where I live. So we went to a premier real estate agent, and as soon as he heard the word 4 BHK rental, he sort of launched with gusto in terms of presenting the best apartment. And he said, "Look, what's great about this, sir, is it's very close to a school and a college, and it's very close to a hospital. You're going to get all the city buzz. It's close to the public transport. It's flooded with light, etc." And my friend just got up and started to leave. And I had a grin on my face because I knew exactly what was going on. But the real estate agent said, "Well, why are you leaving him? We're just getting started." And he said, "Look, my friend, the trouble is my kids are grown up and they live in the US, so I'm an empty nester, so I don't need access to a college or a school. I think I'm active and healthy enough where I don't need an access to a hospital yet. And I drive a car, so I don't need public transport. All I was looking for is a suburban, sort of laid-back street, lined with leafy trees, to finally have some peace and quiet. And so every product feature that you just presented to me is a defect."
Anything you, Ravi?
So I don't think I'm going to be able to trump the Buddha. You got that right. But before I think to the Zinnov team, thank you for bringing us all back together. To the NASSCOM team that did that about 2 weeks ago, it's just an amazingly different experience to be here in person. That said, also Sachin, financial services is kind of, I think, at the front end of where we will get really very effective and truly utilitarian kind of personalization.
Absolutely.
NetApp, of course, has 9,000 plus financial services organizations that we serve. The state of the art today, I think the promise is far in excess of what's being delivered, right? Similar to the example of the house, if you've bought a car any point recently, you know that for the next 6 months, the world assumes you're going to buy your next car. Every week, right? How many cars are you going to buy? It's almost like we've built systems that are preying on us as customers, right? But the opportunity is huge, right? You take the example of a 22-year-old. All 22-year-olds are not the same, right? There's somebody that's graduated from college. There's somebody that skipped the whole college experience, is already working. There's someone that's gotten a different experience, right? They're all very different consumers, but we think of them as, forget 22-year-olds, we think of them as millennials, right, or Gen Z or whatever. So I think there is a strong opportunity to be able to go push things here. And it gets very interesting because I think it's not just that the 22-year-olds are different. The journey from 22 to 32 is even more diverse. So this notion of hyperpersonalization, where it's not that you slot people into buckets, but you understand that everyone's got a unique journey, right? I think we're just getting started.
That's excellent. So from the Buddha time to some of the examples of the recent times to the real technology world, it's not easy, right? Hyperpersonalization is certainly not easy. And it could be data issue, or it could be understanding the human being who changes time to time. As Zen says, you don't step into the same river, you changed and the river has flown. How do you do that in real world, in digital world and physical world and so on, using technologies? Maybe Ravi might start and then Sachin.
Sure. So the big shift, right? From the perspective of a provider of data management solutions, having done it over 30 years, we've evolved to the point where it's not about that the volume of data is massive, not just that the scale at which you're serving it is massive, the agility with which you need to get things done is different. All of that is true. Protecting it is important. Dealing with areas around privacy is important. I think the big shift when it comes down to hyperpersonalization is going to come in that you're not just going to leverage data, you're going to be leveraging human expertise. And integrating human expertise into data streams is going to be the next big challenge. I'll give you an example. We've just come off, or probably still in the midst of some form of a pandemic. We've all looked at vaccines. They've had 95% effectiveness, right? If you start focusing on the 5%, the nature of the problem completely changes. Because the 5% are all different. There are many different reasons. And if you did identify the reason, the remedy is going to be highly personalized. And it's going to be a one-on-one remediation at some point. So the domain changes. Suddenly you need medical expertise to be able to insert it into a stream that's about not just data. The dynamic changes when you look at it in the financial services world, right? We've been doing a lot of personalization in the area of retail. But it's one thing to return a pair of trousers that doesn't fit you, and it's another thing to be able to deal with a customer where you have a fiduciary responsibility, right? So there's all these dynamics that are coming in at play when you look at where the opportunity comes from.
The pharmacogenomics, immunotherapy, so the things, personalized medicine is gaining significant ground, and a lot of research is going on. As you rightly said, it's still in the early stages of hyperpersonalization. Any examples from e-commerce or FinTech from your side?
Oh, sure. Yeah, happy to. So, I think Mohan, my perspective is about being data rich but not insights poor, and it's finding that insight from that proverbial needle in the haystack. And then, more importantly, acting on that insight to drive customer delight. And also that was B2C, but in the context of B2B, it's also about using those insights, helping your customers to monetize, to create net new accretive revenue streams, and ultimately enhance the lives of the customers. So I could give, I guess, an example of each, but in the interest of time, I'll just talk about e-commerce rather than just a generic fintech. So Carat, C-A-R-A-T.
Nothing to do with Tanishq, I guess.
Nothing to do with Tanishq. But it is one of our crown jewels, so in that sense it is. But Carrot is an ecosystem, it's an omni-channel e-commerce ecosystem for payments across devices, across payment methods, securely and at global scale, where we bring merchants and FIs and third parties and integrate them through a number of APIs to curate, the last time I looked, at least 50 unique customer journeys. But what is hyper-personalization, in the context of today about that is, it's, like I said, it's an ecosystem. So for example, voice commerce. So we have a partnership with Amazon and ExxonMobil where you can basically say, Alexa, pay for gas, sitting in your car, and it pays for gas. The second aspect of it is QR code-based payments at point of sale using your mobile phone. You can do things like start a transaction on your mobile phone and so phygital, and complete it in store or vice versa, right? There's things like social commerce. So for example, we have a PayPal and Venmo partnership where the merchant can complete the payment to an end customer, and things like curbside pickup for your restaurant orders, back to my restaurant analogy. The point is, I can go on, but it's not just about how many uniquely different panoply or smorgasbord of experiences we have curated. It's about knowing that you can't bombard all of that onto a customer, but actually allow the customer, based on their tacit and implicit expectations, to pick up that particular customer journey, regardless of the device, regardless of the channel, and regardless of whether it's digital or physical.
That's great. So hyper-personalization also, there's a challenge, right? Because there is a behavior analysis needs to be done. I think some part of it you covered.
Yes.
Contextual analysis. So whatever we see hyper-personalization, we get thrilled. It's very superficial. Where am I located? What websites I clicked, which is a very transactional-based hyper-personalization. What are some of the challenges that we really, truly do hyper-personalization, also called Buddha's personalization?
That's a great question. That's a deep question. I would say, picking up on what you said, right? I think personalization should be relevant and timely and fit for purpose, delightful, etc. But it shouldn't feel like stalking or spamming. You need to get that right, regardless of how digitally naive or digitally native a customer is. And I think it's a tight rope walk, I think, from that sense. So I think that's challenge number one. And the second thing I can think of is, in today's context, I think the biggest challenge for hyper-personalization is how do you react to streaming data and customer events in real time? Because most of the products, and I guess now I should say platforms, are meant to give you a consistent, seamless, reliable experience that's consistent with the brand. But then how do you also offer flexibility at the last minute through, I don't know, like a message bus kind of technology? Or how do you offer flexibility in terms of being able to rearrange a screen on any device through micro apps? It's getting that balance right, according to me, is the biggest challenge. And fortunately, I believe for the first time we have the confluence of various technologies coming together. We've been talking about near real-time and real-time for a long time in the industry, but it feels to me like, and Ravi is a better expert than I am, in this whole space, but I'd love to talk about that.
Anything that you see as a challenge and also some solution in this space other than the expertise that you talked about, which is very profound?
So one is that if you're going to be relevant, correct, a lot of the decision making is going to become real time. So we've built systems that are capable of operating at scale. You're going to have to be a lot more agile about how you're going to make it hyper-personalized. So in some sense, it is about the technology. But at the other end, it's also about how you're going to incorporate new streams and new ways of thinking. So let me put it this way, right? That example of the 95th to 99th percentile.
Correct.
You're going to get an expert in. Go look at the area of financial services now. When you go look at financial services, a lot of what customer behavior is, if it's going to be something that's relevant to me, it has to be able to be something that I can relate to, it makes sense to me. And we know now from finance that for 30 years, that business or that industry, even the academia in economics and finance, have been fighting tooth and nail the behavioral economists and the psychologists, right? Up until 2017, when finally a Nobel laureate was a psychologist in the area, Nobel laureate for economics. So the point is you are having to build in expertise. And expertise is very different from data. And those models just are out there waiting to be discovered. I'll give you another example. You look at health apps, right? For a health app to be personalized, it's not what was done in the cloud. That's essential, absolutely crucial. But ultimately, it has to matter to me. So it's what's happening on my phone or what's happening on my watch and what's happening as I walk into my doctor's office. So again, now you're looking at, you're going to have to incorporate expertise. Bringing it back to a technology question. The devices today all carry GPUs. I don't know, most people don't know, but the phone that you're carrying has got about a few GPUs already. So the question is, are you going to do the analytics at the edge?
Yeah.
Are you going to do it analytics in the cloud? And the answer is yes. The question is, where does what go?
Yeah.
In what order? To what effect? To what impact? Right? And there's like vested work that's already going on that has made that a binary choice. There are people that are saying these are cloud-based architectures. There are people that are saying these are edge-based architectures. It's the experts that will come in and say, if this is the outcome you're trying to drive for you, Mohan, or for me, right? There's got to be an element that sits at the edge, but it's got to rely on something that's in the cloud. And then when the remediation occurs too, it has to be based on what you see at the edge, but the solution may be acted based on information you find on the cloud.
That's excellent. Anything on the algorithm that you can think of as a lacuna in the algorithm which is preventing us to be hyper-personalized?
I think, like I said, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, the way I look at it. We've talked about lots of different point solutions, and it's about how they come together. If I just pick up on your healthcare piece, Ravi, it's that ecosystem of the 3 Ps, as we call it, the patients, the payers, and the providers, right? The whole ecosystem is changing from being sort of episodic illness management to proactive wellness management. And therefore, it's all about monitoring that data in real time. Again, back to the streaming data. From a financial services perspective also, it's the same. So and this is Bangalore, so we should talk about a little bit about technologies, but I can think of event-based architectures. I can think of high availability data cloud architectures. I can think about, in-memory calculations, technologies like Spark, for example, that allow you to do, much faster reconciliations in minutes rather than hours or days. It's technologies that essentially, we should talk about AR, VR, 5G, and Meta, because it's no longer about streaming content just from sensors and IoTs. It's also about streaming content, not just streaming data that you respond to. Automatic data ingestion for all kinds of formats, public data, private data, proprietary data, enterprise data, external data, at scale, because these data are massive volumes. And then the last thing I'll say is near real-time fraud management, reducing false positives using AI, Kafka, Snowflake, etc. All of these technologies have now evolved to a point where you can construct solutions where, as customers change their choices, near to real time or in real time, you can codify the combination of psychographics, past behavior, current context, location data, and demographics to really offer something that's unique and personalized to that.
That's great. That's great. So thank you very much. And I quickly give some takeaways because they spoke quite a profound point. So 3 takeaways I took. The first one is, it's tough to get it done. Hyper-personalization, we agree. The second takeaway is you need some technologies. The foundational technologies that I heard is real-time streaming, not just stored data, because real-time is where you understand the context and behavior better. Sophisticated algorithm, data pipeline that you talked about, and external data that Ravi talked about. So those are the technology infrastructure. And the third, the most important point is you need expertise, because otherwise data without expertise, you cannot deliver personalization. So therefore, those were the 3 takeaways. Maybe I'll summarize. This is the world we call as digital age, right? And this word is used a lot, and I used to wonder, I started selling in '86 And I never sold analog computer, and how come this is called digital in 2015? But it occurred to me that in 1894, when there was a prediction New York and London will go under, the horse manure, because of the horse carriages carrying the executives to Manhattan will dump so much of dung, those cities will be uninhabitable. 1988, there was an urban planning conference to debate this, and as in any conferences, nothing came out of it. But silently, Henry Ford was developing a Model T car. Economies of scale, more car you made, unit prices came down. And so from a one product, many units, and unified market, we moved to segmentation in the information age where I started my career, where there was STP, right? Segmentation, targeting, and positioning at the marketing end, and economy of scope at the production end. And in the digital age, hyper-personalization is segment of one. Not only segment of one at this moment. This is a promise, we are far away from it at the market end, and mass customization at the production end. It's not a desired feature. This is the companies which do this well will eventually succeed. Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Sachin
much.
and Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.